So, the dream team for the final week of the November internationals, well, excluding the Barbars against Argentina game, it is the game, it is the final week. Yeah, to be fair, it's another case of too much rugby, too little time. So, I'm only including the four games I did previews and reviews for, which means, unfortunately, no room for France and Fiji. Likewise, Ireland and the USA and any other games that were played over the weekend. Yeah, not included in my dream team. So I heard both the results. I haven't seen either of those games. I saw a fair bit of the Ireland game just as it was on replay, but I haven't seen the Fijian game in any kind of detail. So I still need to go and watch that. Who knows going forward? I might be able to spend a bit more time watching, but four games was all I got this weekend. So, yep, just those four games from the reviews. And as always, for my fantasy team, or dream team, it's essentially a fantasy team, so it's not a strict 1 to 15. I think I got a couple of tight heads and maybe a couple of inside centers, things like that. So it's not necessarily a strict 1 to 15. Keep that in mind. Because, yeah, sometimes I don't have a fullback, I've got all wingers, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, as always, when I'm done, let me know your thoughts on the team and who else you might have had. Start with the props. First one from Wales, I've gone with Thomas Francis. If you know me, you know I like tries. And I especially like tries scored by big props. And this was one of those weeks. So he broke the deadlock of tries in that game, scored the first try in that game between the Box and Wales. So he had a try. He had 3 runs for 6 meters. How many of those meters were in scoring that try? At least a couple. It counts as a clean break, apparently. 1 clean break. 1 pass, 5 out of 8 tackles is not startling numbers, at least it's not a negative. Some people have mentioned that he was under a bit of pressure in the scrum, but he didn't concede any penalties. And at one point when the Box were on attack and the ball bobbled loose, the first man to it, Thomas Francis. So good effort from him. Pretty happy to put him in that dream team. Next, from England, I have gone with Kyle Sinclair. He was dynamic, I think is the word for it, and it's kind of what we know him for. 11 runs for 19 meters is a very good return from a man in his position. 2 clean breaks is more than a good return for a prop. 2 defenders beaten, 7 passes, including 2 offloads. So he is that kind of prop who has that all-round set of skills. He's not just your traditional puts his head down in the scrum and that's all he does, and maybe a few tackles. This guy's got a full skill set. 5 out of 6 tackles, even got a turnover on the ground. So, a very good night from him. He was either man of the match or nominated for man of the match, but either way, it was a very big shift. Next, and call me a fanboy, but I've gone with Malcolm Marx again. Now, Malcolm Marx is still not playing 100% like we know Malcolm Marx can. By which I mean his carrying is not what it has been previously. I mean, his stats, 5 runs, 4 meters. For Malcolm Marx, that's probably a bit low. I mean, he's never been super work rate guy who's going to make 20 runs in a game or even getting into double figures. But he usually is a bit more effective when he runs with the ball, but it's been a long season, so I'll give him a bit of a break. But that being said, he still had 2 passes with 1 offload, made 6 out of 7 tackles, although that 1 tackle he missed ended up being a try for Wales. I think he missed it on Ellis Jenkins, who ended up passing to Francis. So that was a bit costly. But he got 3 turnovers, and that's the most of any player in that game. That's a player with that Welsh back, a game with that Welsh back row in it, and Malcolm Marx was still the leading turnover man. So for that, I think we've got to give him some pretty big kudos. Line-out was mostly okay. So that's another area he's been criticised a bit. But yeah, I think it's overall pretty good effort from Malcolm Marx. Again, not the complete effort. We know he can do better, but still pretty solid. Next, locks. I've gone with Alan Wyn-Jones from Wales. He had 11 runs in that game. When I'm speaking of work rate, I mean, this guy had the work rate because that is the most runs of any Welsh player in that game. It's by your lock and your captain. So, real captain's effort. 11 runs for 11 meters. So, he's just busting it up 1 meter at a time. Made 14 out of 15 tackles. So, as I mentioned, work rate. The guy had the ball, and the guy was punishing people with the ball. Solid in the line-out, of course. And you noticed when there was a bit of niggle in this game, he wasn't backing down. He was... I mean, as much as you let the referees take charge of it, you still don't let your boys get pushed around, and he was putting in that kind of captain's effort, which is what a leader should do. So he was doing that very well. Next, from England, I've gone with Maro Itoje. 5 runs for 11 metres is a slightly better return than perhaps the average for a prop, because he's going a couple of metres at a prop, a lock for a couple of metres at a time. 5 passes. He got 1 try assist, which was for the Thokana try. It's a bit of a funny try assist because he just kind of flicked it on, and then all the work was done by Thokana. But I mean, hey, he was the last man to pass him the ball, and yeah, that counts as a try assist. So if you were playing fantasy rugby, he would still get points for that. 12 from 12 tackles. That's very solid. 2 turnovers and solid in the line out. A really good all-round effort from him. He is a talented player. Next, into the back row, and we go with Alice Jenkins. So I think he was man of the match in his game as well. 6 runs for 20 metres. I don't always pay attention to man of the match. There's no guarantee the guy's going to be here, because the people who decide man of the match, you see sometimes the way they decide it, and it's just based on gut feeling. So it's not any specific science to it. Sometimes guys who aren't necessarily the best guy get man of the match. But he was far and above. People have said this is his best performance in a Welsh jersey. I wouldn't say no, man. 6 runs, 20 metres, very good return. 3 defenders beaten and a clean break. A try assist, which was a piece of magic when he went around marks. I think he had a wee dummy. Yeah, it was top draw stuff. Very, very slick try. 15 out of 18 tackles. 2 turnovers. Man, the guy was just into everything. I think he was a late call-up as well, so certainly put his hand up, but then ended by injury, apparently something with his ACL, so it could put him out for quite a long time, which is so disappointing after having such a big shift in that game. Next, and I should mention, I've tried to limit the number of All Blacks I've put into this team, because there's always that kind of argument, they only did it against X team, in this case it's Italy, and Italy were really poor in that game. Like, if I just look purely at stats, I could have filled the team with All Blacks. I do try to look at the games fairly evenly, but within reason. So as I said, I'm not filling it with All Blacks guys. I mean, just like last week, I could have had the whole team full of Irish guys based on their performance levels against a top team. I still wanted to give some credit to some guys who perhaps played in games which weren't number 2 and number 1 in the world. So here's my first All Black. I've gone with Vaea Fifita. He's been kind of on the fringe of the All Blacks setup for a while. They dropped him initially because they said he'd be playing too much second row in Super Rugby, and he wants to be playing 6. So they put him at 6, and he put in a good shift. 4 runs for 50 metres is very, very encouraging. 2 clean breaks, 3 defenders beaten, 2 passes including an offload, and 12 from 12 tackles. The next best, just to put it into context, like even if you say, oh, well, it's only against Italy, 12 from 12 tackles was the most by any All Blacks player. The next best was 8. So he was far and beyond the best tackler on that All Blacks performance. His run meters per number of runs is excellent. So even against Italy, very, very good numbers. Next, from Scotland, I've gone with Jamie Ritchie. He put in a real big shift. 5 runs for 9 metres is not a huge return, but his defensive numbers, 4 passes, 18 from 18 tackles, 100% record there. 2 turnovers on the ground, no penalties conceded, another line-out option for Scotland. Yeah, that guy was kind of everywhere, so kudos to him. A lot of teams have got pretty good-looking back rows, along with Wales and Australia, New Zealand, Ireland. Like, the Scottish back row is also looking pretty strong. Yeah, so I'll get onto the backs. Now, just before I do get onto the backs, I'm going to say, towards the end of the video, I'm going to put some extra names up, just to add to the team. It's me being a little bit of a troll, and I don't mean to be a troll, but one guy mentioned it to me in the comments from my last stream team, that he likes to skip to the end of the video to see what I've done, and then kind of go back to the start and and watch to see why I've picked all these guys. It's just a way of watching. It's like people who read the end of the book before they read it. It's just the way people do it. That's all good. But it made me think, because some of the comments I get, I wonder, did you listen? Or did you just look at the names? So I'm going to put some names up at the end, which are players that are perhaps less than the best. Just as a wee test to see if I can see anybody commenting on, why did you pick that guy? He only played a few minutes or something like that. Like I said, it's a wee bit trolly, but it's just like a little experiment. Hopefully nobody comments on those names. You've all seen that this is what I'm doing. So, yeah, I'm just curious to see how many people skip to the end, because it would explain some of the comments that we get. Anyway, on to the backs. I have gone with Greg Laidlaw from Scotland. Not the most runningest game. 2 runs for no meters, but he did have an offload. Defensively solid, 5 from 5 tackles for any number 9 is good numbers. That channel that they defend, wherever it is usually targeted by some of the bigger boys. So 5 from 5 is solid. But the main reason with him, I mean, I know people criticize him for being a bit slow and not giving that kind of quick service. It's not everybody. I still think he's very good number 9. But yeah, I'm saying some people say he's overrated. Scottish people, I've heard that being said, and in the comments. But 3 penalty goals, and 2 of them were 2 misses that were very, very close. Just distance didn't quite get him over the line. Calm, controlled performance. You imagine that game with Argentina was that close. If Laidlaw had been kicking for Argentina, I think they would have won the game. It's that kind of key difference maker. And with a man like that, with a cool head, going into a World Cup year, it's a very, very valuable thing to have, because you want a guy who you know is going to get that kick. He's not going to, I mean, I hate to compare it to Bodie, but sometimes in New Zealand we ask the question, is he going to have his kicking boots on? Because he's just not that consistent. So consistency is a valuable thing, even if it's not like a real sexy tackle busts kind of numbers thing. Speaking of Bodie, I have put Bodie in here. Beauden Barrett. Again, only against Italy is what people are going to say, but a try and 2 try assists is a very good return for, I mean, he didn't play that much into the second half, so for a half and a bit of a game that he played. 11 runs for 79 meters, 3 defenders beaten, a clean break, made a tackle, and even had a line-out steal. How on earth did Beauden Barrett get a line-out steal if you haven't seen the game? Italy had a pre-planned line-out move where they were going to go over the whole line-out and somebody run onto the ball, but they must have seen it, or Bodie must have read it, because he was the first man to it. He came flying out of nowhere and just totally took that ball. So probably, maybe the first line-out steal of Beauden Barrett's All Black career. Perhaps. It's not often I get to say that for a number 10, but it was pretty awesome stuff. Next, into the midfield, I have gone with, from the Pumas, Geronimo de la Fuente. 13 runs for 45 meters. Is one of the higher midfielders this week in terms of run meters. He beat 3 defenders and had 2 clean breaks. To be fair, if he'd picked another running angle, he might have even had a try, or at least a try assist. But the Scottish defence managed to scramble and tackle on that line that he decided to run. 12 passes, including an offload. He did have a few handling errors, which kind of draws him back a little bit. But 13 out of 14 tackles is more tackles than any other backline player from any of the games that I watched this weekend. Any of those 4 games. He had the most tackles for any player in the backs. So very solid stats. He even got a turnover in his effort. So in a losing team, he was one of the better performers. Speaking of midfielders who make lots of tackles, I've gone with Hadley Parkes from Wales. Offensive stats, nothing really fancy to write home about. 6 runs and 17 meters, 3 passes and an offload is pretty ordinary, but 12 out of 15 tackles against the Bok midfield, which is dangerous. De Allende busts a lot of tackles. Creel almost had a try, and Pollard, when he moved into 12, is a guy who is known for breaking the line, or at least getting a gap for somebody else to go through. So Parkes was a large part of shutting that down, and this was what he does. He is one of the ultimate guys for keeping opposition midfields quiet, and he was helping to contain what the Boks were doing there. Lastly, into the outside backs, I have gone with Thakana Singer from England. Very, very impressive game from him. He scored a try, which was really a thing of beauty. He could have had another one, perhaps if he had passed. I think it was to Daly outside him, but not to be. 7 runs, 107 metres, 7 defenders beaten, 3 clean breaks, 2 from 2 tackles. All round solid shift from Thokanasiga. Very impressive. Next, Israel Folau for the Wallabies. Is my only Wallaby on the board. 2 tries. One of them was just an absolute beautiful little line that he ran, hit the ball at pace, and he went through untouched pretty much. I think he might have had to go through one person. 2 tries, 8 runs, 50 metres, 3 defenders beaten, 2 clean breaks, 2 out of 2 tackles, and 2 turnovers. How on earth that happened, I'm not sure, but Folau, my only Wallaby on here with a pretty impressive shift. And lastly, if I was going to say, by the way, if I was going to go for a coach of the week, I would probably have to go for Warren Gatland, because that game was just starting to catch up to Wales when the Boks were really pushing, and he played his subs at the right time, and they really turned the game around and closed the game out for Wales. So Gats would have to be my coach of the week, and if I was going to have to pick a kind of player of the week, like a captain, if it's a fantasy team, you get double points for your captain. Best player, I'd probably have to go with Jenkins. He was really immense for Wales, and as I said, pretty disappointed with his injury. But last player on here, I'm going to go with Geordie Barrett. Again, only against Italy, but dude, he got 4 tries and a try assist. One of them was Beauden Barrett's try assist. It was a cross kick, and Geordie's tall. He's 195 centimeters, like 6'5", and he's gonna tower over most wingers in terms of catching a cross kick, and he did that here. Took the ball, fell down over the line, scored a try. 13 runs, 126 meters, 6 defenders beaten, 6 clean breaks, 4 passes, 2 offloads. I mean, even if you say it's Italy and you halve his stats, it's still 2 tries, it's still like 6 runs, it's still 60, 70 plus meters, 60, 3 defenders beaten, all that kind of stuff. So he's still got massive numbers, even if it was against the top of the team. We will see how he goes at wing if he gets another shot at the wing. But yeah, it was a big effort from him. So yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts on the team, the real one, and which guys you thought played really well and which ones you thought perhaps not the best. I will say, in terms of honourable mentions, Daly had a sweet try for England. He ran a line pretty much as good as Folau's one. Farrell scored a try. I think he had a try assist as well, nice little offload. But that tackle, perhaps a bit of controversy, kept me away from that. Johnny May scored a nice little try early on too. Damien McKenzie for the All Blacks had 3 tries. Anton Leonard-Brown, all-round good performance. Watson for Scotland had 20 out of 20 tackles, which is enormous. Hogg had a really good try assist in a game which didn't have many tries, only the one. Medrano for the Pumas had 13 out of 14 tackles, and their scrum was a lot more solid this week. Michael Hooper for the Aussies, 13 out of 15 tackles and a turnover. Tipperick for Wales, 13 out of 13 tackles and a turnover. Cheslin Colby for the Boks, 12 defenders beaten. All the rest of their starting 15, so the other 14 players that started, had 14 defenders beaten altogether. So Colby was huge in that regard. He probably should be starting. Dan Biggar probably should get a start at some point for Wales, because he put in a massive shift when he came on as well. So yeah, those are the honourable mentions. And yeah, just to finish off, a few extra guys here. So fly half, Tommaso Allen from Italy. He scored their only points of the game. I think his running stats weren't the best. He had 1 run for 0 meters. So probably not the best, but in a game where the opposition scores 66 points, if you can get those 3, you get in the dream team. Who else have I got in the midfield? I should add Manu Tuilangi. For him, I mean, he only played 8 minutes, but he had 2 defenders beaten in those 8 minutes. So if you think about it and do the maths, if he had played for a full 80, he would have had 20 defenders beaten. That's just massive. That's ridiculous numbers. So Manu Tuilangi goes here. Outside backs, Piwadyanti from the Springboks. His running meters are a little bit less than usual. He only had 13 running meters, and his tackling stats were only 1 from 4. But I mean, the guy just won Breakout Player of the Year. I mean, we've seen him do it time and time again. So there's no reason he shouldn't be in the Dream Team for this week, even though this week's stats weren't that good. Breakout Player of the Year. Definitely makes the Dream Team. For the All Blacks, I've put in Waisaki Naholo. So for Waisaki, he was the only All Black, along with Anton Leonard-Brown, not to score a try from that starting backline from 9 to 15. But if you listen carefully, remember this game was played in Rome, so it's an away game for the All Blacks. If you listened really carefully, you could hear, and this is not a joke, you could hear the crowd chanting the Waisaki Naholo song. They usually chanted at Highlanders games in Super Rugby, but they were chanting Waisaki Naholo over in Rome. So that's the kind of impact that guy had on the game. He had the crowd supporting the All Blacks to kind of become that 16th man to really, really get them over the line. So you don't hear All Blacks fans chanting that often. We're not a very kind of singy, chanty people, but the fact that they got Naholo's name on the chant was very impressive. And lastly, Dane Halfback from the Wallabies. He did miss Thokanasiga from that first England, Thokanasiga's try. He kind of got bumped off, and his kick did get charged down, at the start of the game, which led to May's try. And I think his tackling stats were 50-50, but if you think about it, in Australia and New Zealand, 50% is a pass on an exam, so 50% is all good. And he did have a legit 150 meters run, which is more than guys like Thokanasiga this week. And he had 7 defenders beaten, which is the same as Thokanasiga. So I've gone with Dane Halfback for my team. So yeah, you guys have a look at the team. Let me know your thoughts on the players chosen and who else you think probably should be there, who shouldn't be there. And I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.